Good morning, everybody.
Hey there, Nick.
Can
Simon
everyone
here.
can everyone hear me okay? And I'm just getting in the process of switching the screen over to me. Hey, Simon. And also, hello,
Yep.
Chad.
Hey guys, hello everyone else out there as well.
Good morning or good start to the afternoon. And just wanted to check to make sure that everyone can see my screen okay and everyone can hear us just before we begin. So feel free in the GoToWebinar panel to just type in the chat field or the questions field. Oh, there we go. We've got a couple of responses. Hello from my bank holiday, Mads. Great for you to join us. Hi, Kent. Awesome. Hey, Simon. That's awesome. And yes, we are on the last week of the Demystifying series for VFX workflows. Isn't that crazy, Chad?
It is crazy. It's like I was thinking about that this morning. I was like brushing my teeth. I was like, man, this is kind of bittersweet. Like this is like a cool accomplishment. We did the month, it's been fun, but like kind of bummed. This is it.
Yeah, this is it. And this week's going to be all about faster compositing with Supercomp and After Effects. And I can't believe we got even an extra week because August has 5 Mondays and it feels like we could cover so much more. But I'm pretty excited to kind of wrap this up and draw a conclusion. And just to let you know, this series is continuing. Simon, if I'm correct, right now it's definitely continuing for September and October, although October is not listed right now. And for September, it's all Cinema 4D focused with Ellie, Matt, and Jonas. And there's going to be some fantastic tips about MoGraph generators, effectors, fields, and fracturing. Am I correct, or is it even longer, Simon?
Absolutely. No, what you're absolutely right. We've got C4D stuff all through September, and the team have got some really cool things to show. And in October, yes, spoiler alerts, we are doing October, and we're doing a lot more about different NLEs, how you can make different effects work on the timeline as you're editing as well. So we'll have that information up shortly.
Cool. Yes, and on top of going to the Red Giant blog and being able to sign up for these webinars, you should know that we are recording this session, and you can go to the Maxon Volume Program training on YouTube, subscribe, and usually a few hours after this webinar, this will be posted. Maybe a little bit longer, but roughly around that time. Give it a day. You'll be able to watch this webinar over again, and if you miss something, just fast forward to the part that you need to. So feel free to share those links. And yeah, without further ado, we're kind of we're covering today all about faster compositing in VFX Suite and primarily looking at Supercomp. We did look at Supercomp a little bit in week 1, and throughout the weeks as we went along, we looked at little tidbits. But today we're going to try to cover a few of the areas that we've looked online and seen about certain effects within it that aren't covered, as well as just cover the overall workflow and see how you can make it advantageous for you guys and what you do. So without further ado, I know Chad, you have some stuff to show.
I do.
What I'm going to do is just head over here and hand this over to you. Oh, I can see your name. That's fantastic. You should see a screen just heading over to you, and then I'll hop back in a little bit and show you guys some breakdowns of some projects that I love and have seen within Supercomp.
Are you seeing my screen, Nick?
I am not just yet, no.
Okay, let's see here.
I can see it.
Okay, then we're probably fine. If one of you can see it, then we're probably safe.
Rob can see it too.
Okay, good.
I see it now too. I'm a late bloomer.
Better late than never, though.
Yeah.
So yeah, welcome everybody. As Nick said, I want to talk a little bit about Supercomp. We mentioned Supercomp briefly, but I think it's worth like kind of digging into like just the basics of what it is. So that's what I want to talk about like for the first kind of half of this morning. And then Nick is going to kind of go into more details of Supercomp, but just understanding really what Supercomp is really important. And it's a really unconventional tool, and I find that a lot of people are using it for things that you shouldn't use it for, and then they're getting confused by that and frustrated. And so I really want to break down just like really the purpose of Supercomp and some basic uses here. So, and just to kind of bring everything home, I did this render in Houdini this week, and Houdini is a little bit of a challenge to use. And so I have this thing that I created using like code and like all this stuff that's above my pay grade. And I lit it with an HDR, and so it has like, it's too bright in some spots. I want it to be more vibrant in others. And I really didn't know how to do that in Houdini yet, because I'm not that great with like look development. So I rendered out one single EXR file, and I put the render passes in that we've been talking about all month. And that allowed me to go in with this single file and use the extractor plugin to extract, the base color, which is just the diffuse color, and to extract the reflection pass and matte that with the depth pass and specularity and the whole bit, and kind of put it all together to this look, which is kind of more what I was going for. This is the original, and this is what I did after I fiddled with it. And the point of this is, leading into our Supercomp conversation, is that I did this all in After Effects using native tools, using the blend modes, using track mats. And that's a huge part of Supercomp, is not doing what After Effects already does well. So all these blend modes and mats and things like that, I did all of this not using Supercomp. And I think that, again, in order to use it well, we have to understand what Supercomp is and is not. And what Supercomp is for blending things together. It is for blending things together. So if I then had my final version of this file, and I added some text here, which I've done, and I want to blend this together and make this text look like it's part of this scene, then that is when I would want to use Supercomp. So what I'll do is I will select the layers that I want to add to my Supercomp into this blending of files, and then I can go into the effect dropdown, VFX, and then add Supercomp. And what that's going to do is it's going to put these two layers, or the selected layers, into a Supercomp. And then I get this like floating window. And the reason why it's a floating window is so that I can look at the end result and also my work here in Supercomp. So when I'm selecting something in Supercomp, for example, I'm looking at just that layer and what's being done to that layer. And then in the composition panel, I can see the final result. So it's good to have both of these open. And obviously, if you have multiple monitors going on, like that makes things a little bit more convenient. But let's talk about this text for a second and what makes Supercomp so powerful. I saw some stuff online when Supercomp came out last year that like, oh, well, it's a bunch of effects and we all have effects already and things like that. And no, that's not what it's about. Again, this is all about blending. So I have these layers and I can create effects. So I can select, like, say for the background, I'll click on this. And in most cases, I choose Optical Glow, but in this case, I'm going to choose Layer Glow. And I believe Nick is going to explain the difference between those two later. And if not, I could just kind of dig into why I chose that in this instance. But I'm gonna go ahead and choose Layer Glow, which is very similar to Optical Glow, the regular standalone effects that was introduced with the VFX Suite last year. That's incredible. And then I can go over here to my text layer, and you can see again, I click the plus icon. I have all these cool effects, but this is a result of the coolness of Supercomp and not the coolness itself. The magic is not the fact that we have cool effects like diffusion or haze or whatever. The magic of Supercomp is that we have these effects in this environment where the layers talk to each other like they're unable to do in the layer-based compositing workflow of After Effects. So I can click the plus icon here, and let's say I'll choose Light Wrap. And so I add some light wrap here. I basically have two values that I'm concerned with right now. Amount, which is like the intensity of the light wrap, and I'm going to crank this value up quite a bit just so you can really see what's going on here. And then the size, which is how far in the glow is allowed to kind of like encroach upon the text. I'm going to take that down a little bit just so we can see this a little bit more clearly. But this is the advantage of Supercomp, because the text is on top of the glowing city, but the glow from the city is on top of the text. So, and another thing too is that, I mean, we can create this is not like a groundbreaking effect, but it is groundbreaking in that it is dynamic. So if I make a change to the background, if I were to color correct it, if I were to do something else to it, then my glow would update accordingly. Or if we decided to like move our text to a different part of the image, then on these areas where there isn't much glow, then we don't have like any glow coming across our text. And like where we have this text over a green object, the light wrap, you could see it's spilling over. Again, if I move my text over this way, that it's not getting the green glow, maybe just like an edge of it a little bit. But this is the power of Supercomp, where we are dynamically allowing layers to speak to each other and to hop over the layer order restrictions that we typically have. Now, before I show you another quick examples, let me go over just a couple things really quick to know about Supercomp. Two things to know about Supercomp. Number one, it's an integration engine. Like I talked about, the purpose of it is to blend things together. It's to integrate different objects. That is its main purpose. And number two, like I said, it doesn't replace anything that After Effects does well. So if you're looking for like, you know, where's like the fractal noise and where is the blah, 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 whatever that After Effects already has, it's not going to be there. It's not meant to do things that After Effects already does well. And as I mentioned, there are three things to know about Supercomp. And we use it at the very, well, 3.5 things. And so we use it at the very end of the workflow. That's another important aspect of Supercomp, is that we don't use it as we're going. You want to, for the best results, you want to use it at the very, very end of the workflow. And then finally, is the 3.5 thing, is it's always in 32 bits per channel. And that's one of the miracles of Supercomp, because as we're playing with this, you know, After Effects normally we're allowed to change the bit depth on a per project basis. But a lot of times we might have tons and tons of compositions, and 8 bits per channel might make more sense, and we can work a lot faster. But then sometimes we want to do compositing in 32-bit to get like these, you know, highlights and all the blossoms and all the beautiful things that come along with 32 bits per channel. And Supercomp always works in this its own environment. It processes things in 32 bits per channel, which is amazing. So those are the things that I wanted to show you about Supercomp. Let me show you a couple other benefits to Supercomp.
Chad?
Yes.
Do you mind if I ask a question? Because you brought up something I'm very curious about it, because you talked about blending things together.
Do it.
And I was curious how you would differentiate this from the blend modes that are built into After Effects. That's just one thing that kind of came to my head. So it's like, oh, you have blend modes in After Effects, but then you have the blending of objects, and how Supercomp would differentiate itself from that, right? And would it?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So what a blend mode does in After Effects is that it takes the layer and applies a certain set of rules to it. So like, let's say like right here, this example I just switched to, the fire's in screen mode. If I took it in normal mode, this is what it is in normal mode. And then we take it into screen mode. And one of the things that it does is it takes the black and it removes it. And it has an algorithm for lightening the fire against the background. And like, that's it. And it's a great tool. It's a great thing that it does, but like, that's what it does. And in a sense, it blends it together, but again, in a prescribed way that you don't have any control over realistically. But what Supercomp does is it creates a world of blending that gives you all kinds of control over the way that you blend things together. So it's not just kind of like, okay, here's this one set of circumstances where you can blend things together. It's a world of blending options for the edges, for how we adjust the color, for how we glow things and how that glow speaks to different layers above and behind it. Light wrap, reverse light wrap, all these different tools to allow layers to integrate with each other, if that makes sense. So it's almost like these blend modes are like a donut and Supercomp is a kitchen, if that makes sense.
I love it. That does make sense to me, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to load up all of these layers into Supercomp, and I'm going to show you a couple of really cool tricks with Supercomp. You could also do the effects and presets panel thing. This is actually where I use to, like as a tutorial person, like when I'm doing tutorials, it's like very common to go into the effect menu so that people can see where things are at. But realistically, in my workflow, I never use that ever on my own. I always use the effects and presets panel because I just search for it and then don't have to remember where it's at. It's my preferred way of doing things. Anyway, so I have this pop up here. And a couple things you'll notice that I'm gonna get back to in just a second is that a couple of these layers, you know, like the last time we looked at Supercomp, they had this kind of like grayish bluish color. Then we have some layers that are yellow. And what it is that when we click on a layer in Supercomp, there's different layer types. There's the normal layer, which we've seen, but there's also additive and displacement layers. And when you have a layer that's in an additive mode, like additive blend mode, like screen or add, then when you put it into Supercomp, Supercomp recognizes that and automatically turns it into an additive layer. We'll talk about the power of that momentarily. But I want to show you a new feature in Supercomp that just came out a little bit ago. And I have here the Mazinger, the robot, and then I also have the island background. I'm actually going to shrink my Supercomp so I can kind of move it out of the way here so we can see this. There we go. So one of the features that's new, I'm going to go ahead and click on this plus button. I'm going to add color correction. One of the challenges of color correction is going through and trying to make a subject match the background. And this has become much easier with the new release of Supercomp, because in the color correction area, there's this gargantuous match background button. And I can just click match background, and instantly it looks at the black levels and the color of the area behind the object and instantly makes it apply to your object, which is really fantastic. Now, what you might do here, let me select my my Mazinger layer here. In this case, the background is actually much further away than the robot is. So we wouldn't want to actually match this background. He's probably more in line with this area right here. So what I could do is move him to this spot, click match background to kind of like sample this area of dark, maybe even like right here. Boom, do that. And then when I put him back in this spot, he blends in a little bit better because he's about on this depth plane, which makes a little bit more visual sense. And what I can do here is I can click this button right here, which is the on and off icon for each effect in Supercomp. So I can see the before, this is the original, and then after. Look how beautifully that's composite. It looks like he has just a little bit of depth haze on him, and that just looks fantastic. So that's a great new feature in Supercomp that allows you to blend things together in a much quicker way. Now I'm going to turn on some of these other layers again here so we can get to what I think is one of the greatest features of Supercomp, and that's the ability to composite additive layers, especially things like fire, because fire is one of the biggest jerks. You know, it's such a jerk. Like fire is absolutely gorgeous. It's one of the most like beautiful things on the planet to me. It's just like really like ragey, and it has like all this like passion and energy to it and like tons of light. And so it's gorgeous. And it's like destructive. So it's kind of like got this like, you know, scary element to it that's kind of like fun and dangerous and stuff. But the thing is, when we composite it, it's such a jerk because it wants to use like these additive blend modes like screen, but then it makes it kind of like semi-transparent and weak. And so fire is kind of like this hybrid thing that is really, really, really bright, but also opaque and not totally transparent like that, so which makes it difficult to composite. So one of the things that Supercomp does is it gives us tools to make this infinitely easier. I'm going to do a couple things to this fire really quickly, and you'll notice that when I have an additive layer, we have different effects. We have a regular effect, we have like this full ring of things, and when we have an additive layer, we don't have as many effects, but we have a couple that we don't have on regular layers, including heat blur and core matte, and I'll talk about those momentarily. First, I'm going to just add some optical glow here, and I'm going to turn down the amount a little bit and the size a little bit. I'm also going to go to color correction very quickly and change the temperature a little bit. Like this has a little bit cooler of a deal here, this world, and so just kind of cooling off this fire a little bit. That's good. So already it looks better, but nothing, you know, earth-shattering or revolutionary here. But the magic comes when we click this plus icon and we add one of these two deals. I'm going to try core matte first. That's really what I want to get to. As I mentioned with fire, it becomes too transparent oftentimes, like when we use the screen blend mode. And so this core matte effect that I just added here, it allows you to create density using a matte, and so it creates opaque areas. As we increase the grow amount, we're increasing the black in the matte. I'll crank this up a lot so you can see that here. And let me just spread this out. So I'll move this over. And so we're creating a matte that's going underneath this fire, and the black areas are opaque and the white areas are transparent. So if we want to, again, we could keep increasing this grow, and then that will make this fire more dense, and I could increase erode, which will erode the edges and make them more transparent. So we have total control, and it's also procedural, it's dynamic. It's using the fire itself as its own matte behind the scenes. And so we create this really realistic fire. So if I turn this off and on, you're seeing these areas getting more opaque and transparent as we turn it on and off. So now we have more opacity and our fire looks a little bit more genuine. Now I'm also going to go back to this little plus icon. I'm going to add some heat blur. This does a similar thing where it takes a black and white version of the fire, but in this case we're using it as a heat displacement map, which is really incredible. Now I need to turn up displacement a bit to be able to see this. And also what I can do is increase the add texture value, which will increase the area around the fire where the displacement texture lives, which is pretty cool. I'm going to, I don't think I need to go that crazy with the add texture. I might need to go a little bit more with the displacement just so we can see it here. And then what I want to do here is go into my text, and I'll just add some just optical glow here and tone that down just a bit. Now, here's where the magic is, folks. Here's where the power is with this effect. As I start playing this, we're going to start to see this text being displaced. And right here, this is what I want to show you. This is Supercomp in a nutshell to me. This is where the magic is. So we're seeing the fire, which is on top of the text. We're seeing it on top of the text, even though the fire is in the screen blend mode, and the fire is on top of this white text, we're still seeing the fire on top of the text. So the fire and the text are speaking to each other. And normally, when you have something that's bright like fire in screen mode on top of white glowing text, it would just be white. But in real life, there would be more dynamic range than that. There would be values brighter than white. And that's kind of what we're getting with this fire, where we can see some of it on top of the whiteness. And so there are areas, if we were to kind of keep playing this back here, there's areas where the displacement of the text is on top of the fire, and there's times when the fire feels like it's on top of the text. And this type of effect where you're kind of like, we can't really tell what's on top because we're getting the heat blur from the fire adjusting the text, and then anyways, you can tell that the text is in the middle of the fire, and you really can't replicate that any other way with layer-based compositing. This is the magic of Supercomp to me, really. As a compositor person, like, this is very, very difficult to achieve with just using After Effects on its own. Let me show you one other example here. I love using Supercomp to composite smoke because there's a really great effect for me that I love using. So I'm just gonna add this to Supercomp very quickly. This is, by the way, a little comp I made here, and then this triangle has a luminance pass. We can select the triangle reflection and the triangle itself. And then we also have some smoke that I made in Trapcode Particular. So what I can do here is I'm going to go to my triangle and I'm going to add my Optical Glow. And I'm just going to do this really quickly since I'm just about out of time here. I'll tone down my glow amount a little bit and the size of the glow, just get a little bit more reasonable. There we go. And what I want to do is I want to make this smoke look like it's really receiving this glow in a dynamic way. And one of the tools that I found to do that, because this is not really realistic. I mean, the smoke I think looks fairly decent on its own, the particular smoke. The triangle, the glow looks cool. But like, if this were real life, just the volumetric nature of smoke, this light from the triangle would be permeating this particular smoke in a more volumetric way. We would see the volume of the smoke, which, as you know, it's a difficult thing to fake in a 2D compositing program. Because really, like with Particular, these are just kind of like, 2D cloudlet sprites, right? But what we can do here is go to Particular Smoke, and one of the effects I like to use is Blur Behind. So what it's going to do is it's going to blur the things that are behind the smoke. So I'm going to take this up to a ridiculous level. And as I do, what it's doing is it's taking, again, this is on the smoke layer, but it's blurring the stuff behind the smoke. In this case, it's the glow from the triangle. And we can intensify that by using the amount value if we want to, but I think in this case, keeping it low is fine. But as I take this to ridiculous values, we start to see that the glow from the triangle is kind of wrapping around the smoke in an interesting way. And this is kind of hard to see here. What's my resolution? So I'm only at half resolution. I'm gonna just dock this for a second, take this up to full here. And you can see like this, like what's happening to this little area of smoke here is exactly representative of, again, the magic of Supercomp. It's taking this object, the triangle on the layer that's below it, and because of this blur behind effect, it's creating these kind of like edges, these pink edges, which makes the smoke feel more volumetric and illuminated by this triangle. Of course, we can go in and tweak this and get this to look a little bit better. But the magic here is that we're able to take these layers and, again, using Supercomp's integration engine, bring all these things together so that the layers are talking to each other. And that creates these type of effects where we're having this dynamic effect. And if I were to take the particular smoke and move this over and just shift it all the way over here to the left-hand side, then it would glow on the other side of the smoke, because it's this dynamic thing. We don't have to jerry rig all these kind of like hacked together bubblegum duct tape options that are not live and flexible. Supercomp is just this dynamic procedural thing that's actually allowing the layers to talk to themselves, talk to each other in a way that normal After Effects stuff just doesn't allow. So that's Supercomp, the basics of Supercomp in a nutshell.
Very cool. There was a question, Chad, just here in the chat that I wanted to bring to your attention, which is Rihanna, hope I pronounced your name right. It was just curious, does Supercomp work with 3D environments in After Effects? So specifically 2.5D and then true 3D, like Cinema 4D, or I guess maybe that's putting it through something like Element or Trapcode Mirror.
Well, if you're just using a regular layer, so these are renders from Cinema 4D. So if you're doing a render, then it's like that's not an issue. But with 3D layers, yes, you can use them in Supercomp. Oftentimes, you'll need to pre-compose them in order for Supercomp to use them. I believe that's still the case. Keep in mind that Supercomp is a baby. Supercomp just turned 1 year old in June, so it's still a new effect. And so like they're constantly adding like new features to it, and there's definitely places I think that Supercomp wants to go as like they continue to enhance it and sexify it a bit. And 3D objects, again, they can be used in Supercomp, but you often need to pre-compose them.
Okay, awesome. And it just appears that there might be a bit of a delay on the system. I think, I don't know if that just happened in the last little while, but I know Zach was reporting that it seems like the screen is updating like every 30 seconds on your end. But since it's coming back to me anyways, Chad, I was just thinking we could just see and take the audience poll to see if there's still a delay on my system, and then I'll try to adjust accordingly from there.
Phooey, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm gonna just make you the presenter, and hopefully then
Okay.
we'll just be all fluid and junk after that.
So no deja vu. I do have Zinger up on my screen too, just for a second. Don't worry, we're gonna go to another comp. But yes, does Chad, do you see it okay? Simon,
Yes.
how's it looking on your end of the switch? I am currently pointing my mouse at Mazinger in the VFX Supercomp panel.
Yeah, your mouse is moving in real time to me.
Anyone else? Just can let me know in the question field that that is real time. Good here, awesome, great, thanks everybody. I just had to scroll down in the question field to make sure that that everything was okay. So, Chad, that was such a great breakdown, by the way, of the fire and the additive layers. That was awesome, man. And just being able to kind of see those like individual components specifically for additive layers and how you could use them. And I'm still shocked today with how like quickly you can set that up, you know. And you added those effects, which was kind of cool. And it was just so quick and easy for you to use those layers, composite them together during the last stages within your After Effects composite. Now, I wanted to show something here specifically. You had mentioned Layer Glow and Optical Glow, which are both two options for layers within Supercomp and what the differences are. And I have made a duplicate copy of my Mazinger hero character here in the front, as you can see in the foreground. And what I'm going to do, I already have the two effects just disabled on the layer. And I'm going to enable one of the effects, which happens to be the Layer Glow. If we take a close, it looks like I turned it off with a shortcut key somehow. Let me just enable that effect again. There we go. If we just kind of take a close look, Chad, do you see how it's kind of wrapping just a little bit around the edges of the character? And there really isn't any type of foreground interaction with the glow?
Yes. Could you zoom in on the comp window?
I'm actually just going to press the tilde key just so that we can kind of see that full frame. I tried to zoom in, but I don't think it transfers through the GoToWebinar. But here we can kind of see how the layer glow is interacting with the layer. There is a little bit tailing off at the edges of the character, and that really has to do with the light wrap that's turned on. And I'm going to disable that effect. And let's just take a look here now with its brother or sister, which is Optical Glow. And you see a huge difference with the foreground there, not to mention the intensity at the edges, Chad?
Yeah, I would zoom in again just to make that like just
I want to zoom in just to make sure that everyone can see that.
Yes.
Okay. So it's much more intense, and that's because the Optical Glow is wrapping and interacting greater with those foreground objects. And I think that's what's one of the benefits of Optical Glow. We've mentioned it a few times, which Optical Glow is also a standalone effect within the VFX Suite. So you don't have to go to Supercomp to use it if you're just interested in that effect. Now, if you happen to add Optical Glow at a later stage, like I have right now, in fact, I'm just going to turn off my Mazinger character and just show a few things, kind of an example of the fire again and its interactivity here with the text layer. The only difference that I did compared to you, Chad, was in this example, because I was in a rush to put this together, I went to the plus icon and chose a preset. And here are already like a series of presets within Supercomp that you can use. You can take your favorite presets and mark them as a favorite, and then that's going to pop up at the top of the layer presets menu under the favorite section. And then you could just take it and apply it to a Supercomp layer. It should be mentioned that also, if you're going to be finding yourself doing the same type of composites over and over again within Supercomp, you can select the layer, and you'll notice that when I right click it, you have the option to save this collection of effects as a layer preset as well. That's just going to save you a lot of time if you need to apply the same type of technique to a very similar looking shot. Now, a lot of times, I don't know, it's just me, Chad, but a lot of times when, I have something that is glowing, like I wanna make it blink, like I wanna wiggle it. It's just one of those things. It just comes up here, here's optical glow. I want to take this amount and I want to make it blink. And you'll notice that if we take a look at the Supercomp panel, I really just have one effect here, and that's because I added it earlier. But if you see Supercomp by default here, it will have no effect parameters whatsoever. This keeps it super clean and super fast. And you should note that when you decide or want to add an effect to animate add an effect parameter to animate from an effect that you've added onto a layer, you can, let me actually just move my playhead noticeably to the beginning of the comp here. You can add a parameter by clicking on the stopwatch. Now the stopwatch is only going to appear when you're kind of hovering over a parameter. You can kind of see that happen right now, the little stopwatch icon. You can then simply go over here to the side and add that over here. And now you have all of the effects that would be within After Effects that you could use. So here I'm just going to, option click that sword effect that I added. And now I can add my favorite wiggle expression here, 2x10 in this case. And we can start to see that there is a little bit, let's bring down the composite, a little bit of a blink happening there with the optical glow.
It's awesome.
In fact, I might just make that a little bit more intense so it is super noticeable. There we go. Wiggling way too much, but it does kind of show the intensity wiggling. And that's not the only thing that you can, of course, keyframe. Any of these parameters are available, as well as some of the new ones which are in Optical Glow. So in the latest release, which is 1.5, Optical Glow got even better. And some of those parameters include, separating the size in both X and Y values, which could create a glow just on one particular level. So expanding it right now on the Y channel, along with this radiate control, which would create yet another kind of cool glow effect. So this is way too much. But if we see a little preview here, specifically in the VFX Supercomp, you can see what radiate is doing with that glow. And just like before, if we take a look at some of these values as I hover over them, again, these are keyframeable and you can use them and bring them outside of the Supercomp panel and into your effect controls to animate anything else like you would in After Effects. So besides those things that I wanted to mention about the Supercomp panel and management, this is a really kind of cool example of Supercomp in action with a bunch of different elements at play, and shows how it helped composite several elements together, along with a few things that were used before in VFX Suite to tie this all together. So I just wanted to, first of all, after my autosave does its fantastic job, just solo my sorceress layer so you can see it here. And we can see a collection of effects that were applied before bringing this to Supercomp. Let me just turn that off. Chad, you demonstrated last week or a few weeks ago the spot clone tracker.
Yes.
And how awesome it is. And here you can see multiple versions of that spot clone tracker, keying out the tracking markers here. and then a version of Primat here. And while this isn't so filled up, just note that there is an actual mask on the sorceress layer. Now, the magic part about this, you'll notice that the sorceress isn't pre-composed, Chad. Like, it's literally all of the effects are there, and you're able to send this to Supercomp. There's no need to pre-compose that layer. It's going to see all of the effects that you've added before, which is kind of sweet, in my opinion. It's going to save you time for some of those workflows. Other pre-comps that you see here are more for organizational purposes and for the fact that I want Supercomp to treat, which is a collection of particles or organic effects separately, as one element combined. So now that we've seen the sorceress layer, basically the same process where we selected a bunch of layers inside of your composition, and then from the effect menu, once you choose Supercomp, it's going to add all of those layers for you automatically. And for any reason that you forgot a layer, usually here in the source layer area, you can click a plus icon and that's going to be added to it too. So it's literally seeing everything in your After Effects composition at all times. So I wanted to take a look right now actually at the foreground layer. So let's draw our attention. I'm going to turn off the Mystic Energy, as in there's some pretty cool effects that brought this fog together. And one thing you can always do is if you're ever looking at a Supercomp project that you get your hands on, you can always right click that layer and then choose to disable all of the effects on it. And here you can see how strong that fog is by default, right? It's quite strong and it's not really integrating well with the background. And it's through that combination of effects that are available for different types of layers that you're going to get to your end result. So here I have that Supercomp layer, and the first thing I want to draw your attention to is that there's a subtle color correction effect. Now, this isn't using a match color effect as much as it's just being used to bring down some of the intense white levels in the fog to sort of match the more grayish atmosphere that you see right now happening in this forest, and with all of the blocking of the trees, basically blocking some of the outside light. So you've got a simple color correction effect here. And then Chad, you've already showed, the power of light wrap, and light wrap is currently being used on the fog here, wrapping the light specifically of the forest's ground here and some of the forest horizon to integrate that a little bit better. I always like to mention that for me, at least in Supercomp, or when I started, Chad and Simon, was that when I added light wrap, it took me a few seconds to actually see its effect on like the foreground characters that I was applying it to. So usually I would end up, cranking up this amount, but I just like to mention that, the amounts start off rather low for a good reason, which is that you want it to be subtle. The whole idea is that you want everything to feel unified, and you don't want a specific effect like light wrap to essentially take over a layer or an object and it to be noticeable. So that's why when you add some of these effects, they are rather subtle to begin with, minus, I would say, some of the additive effects where you do want it to feel much more integrated because of some of the distortion that those elements create, such as fire and what Chad demonstrated. Now, on top of the light wrap effect, there's a haze effect. And this is just a great overall effect for kind of taking an element and making it more atmospheric, especially the more further it is in the background. While it's great specifically for our fog here in the foreground to sort of bring down, let me just disable the effect so you can see what it's doing to the overall fog. And I always like to pay attention to my composition window and just the element by itself isolated in the VFX Supercomp panel. We can sort of see the effects of haze bringing that down through a softness in the shadowing and integrating it a little bit better into the background. Not to mention that the further it moves into the background, kind of seeping out, it blends in with it a little bit more. If this was an object specifically with a lot more color, it would appear less saturated the closer it would be to the background, which is why haze can be such a useful effect. Now, this isn't talked about too often, but a lot of times, while you want a foreground element to basically have the light of the background wrapped around the edges of the subject, there are a number of times where you want the foreground object to also basically wrap light around the background objects. And that's where the reverse light wrap is. We're essentially telling the fog, in this case a very low amount, to wrap some of its light on all of the background objects included within the Supercomp panel. So I'm just going to crank that up just a little bit so we can see the results. You can see it's way too strong in this case, but the light specifically from the fog, this grayish element, is wrapping itself around all of the background elements right now, which is pretty sweet and can be useful depending on the type of object that you select. Now, last but not least, there's a little bit of diffusion added to the fog as well to sort of soften the lights and this organic source. This can be also used on a bunch of light sources that you would have in your final composite as well. And now this collection of effects, by selecting the Supercomp layer here, is easily savable as a preset to which we can say apply for fog in forest, and then becomes available to us inside of our preset section. So just let me hit on the plus icon here and just show that in a new section called custom, that collection of effects. Now, another thing I love about this specific example, I have a number of various sort of organic elements, and it's just worth noting what this particle system, this is a particle system specifically made with, I believe, particular. If I solo it out here, this is how it originally looked. You can see its color is completely different, but it's a series of Trapcode Trapcode form systems. In fact, a number of form systems that are here and emitting slightly using a various types of reactions within the plugin. So a number of form systems, but this could also be kind of created specifically with particular as well. So this energy composite, if we take a look at here, it was just simply color corrected and not using the color values, but the temperature and tint slider to give it a completely different look. And then a heat blur was added to it, so it did almost feel like it had a source of energy to it. And one great thing about the heat blur effect is that it has some displacement controls, which is why you see as this just surrounding this actual energy pre-comp field, there is a series of distortion and displacement occurring on the forest background, the canopy here of the trees. And that was specifically done with heat blur. Now, speaking of chromatic displacement, there are also standalone effects for that. One in VFX Supercomp that we didn't, I don't think we covered. Did we cover it, Chad?
I don't think so.
So there's a chromatic displacement. Yeah, and it's available as a standalone effect, which you can add and apply to layers without going to VFX Supercomp. Not to mention there is also, if you add something as displacement layer, you have those options that you would have from the chromatic displacement effect. So that was the composite that I wanted to show. And I did want to mention, I have an example here where you can see an element 3D helicopter here. This is also using lens distortion to bring in all of these elements, as well as what I believe to be these organic elements specifically from Action VFX. And they were brought together into a composite. And if we just take a look at the helicopter, the job specifically within Supercomp was the use of haze because of it off in the far distance. Let me just actually disable all of the effects temporarily here. So you can see what it looked like before it was handed over to Supercomp. Let me enable these effects and now disable haze by itself and enable it. So you can sort of see how it's much more kind of muted in color based on where it is in the clouds. We've then got some light wrap from the environment, not to mention some subtle color correction, specifically using the match background effect to integrate it here in the far background. And besides selecting layers, you can also select the entire Supercomp effect containing these layers. And on this effect, it should be noted that there happens to be a master grain control. Now, I covered this really briefly in week 1, but it's worth mentioning that you can apply grain to all of your elements, and it's a 2-step process. So step number 1 is already enabled for you, where you have a master grain control. I'm going to come up here and just set this to 25% so that we can notice it. Not to mention that we could add or increase the size and the texture of the grain. So I'll make this 15% to each of these values. I'm just tabbing down in terms of the controls here. Now that it's activated on the Supercomp level, it's now a matter of going to these individual elements that you sent to Supercomp, so the element helicopter, and then turning up how much of that grain you want it to affect your helicopter. So let me just, crank it up to its full amount, which is 100%. And then also do the same for the background plate, which is containing all of my other objects. And just to make sure that you guys see this, I'll actually increase the master grain a bit too here. Now we should start to see the grain pattern, much more noticeably the noise pattern in the VFX Supercomp panel, and how it's taking effect in the composition window as well. Let me bring that down a bit to something more like 20%. And that grain control just gives you yet another way to tie in and finish off your composite for all of these layers. Cool.
Awesome, man.
I have not checked, so I'm just going to head back to the GoToWebinar page because I've been deep in After Effects.
There's one question that I want to address really quick about working with OpenEXR in Supercomp. And most of the examples that I use, I just want to point out really quickly, were just raw EXRs. Like when I did the text over the Houdini render, I pre-composed that, but it was all OpenEXR stuff. So you could take reflection passes and whatever else you're using and use that in Supercomp just like you would any other layer as well. So I feel like it works best to do the basics of the composite in regular After Effects. That way you have LumaMat options and that kind of stuff for creating keys if you need to with certain passes, but blending it all together like reflection passes, specular passes, whatever in Supercomp is a really great workflow and a great idea, and OpenEXR files work just like any other layer. So just want to say that real quick.
Cool. And then I know there was a question from Elizabeth here about this, asking about if the smoke can also be reflected in the water. I guess there's probably 2 ways that you can attempt this, and one is actually even just before going into Supercomp, Elizabeth, you can use the reflection effect that's available to you and sort of try to align and then track it to the water position, specifically if it was a moving background plate. So there is a actual standalone reflection effect in VFX Supercomp. And remind me if I'm incorrect, Chad, but this is something, did you cover it last week or the week before?
Yeah, I believe that we talked about the reflection plugin last week. And so that was actually, the reflection was actually rendered into Cinema 4D before that feature was added to the reflection plugin. So if I were doing that now, I would do that with the reflection plugin and not burn it into the render with Cinema 4D, because you actually have a lot more control that way.
Yes. Yeah. So you can find the reflection effect, which is going to give you kind of like a T-based. Here, I'll just actually isolate this. And we can actually even see that this does have a subtle reflection effect on it already, that we can, of course, soften a little bit more. But it is using the VFX reflection here on the ground for this Mystic comp, and its opacity has been brought down. And this could be found just under all of the RG VFX plugins. You can see reflection here as a standalone. So that's one way to do it. And then there's some tricks to do, like a sort of semi-reflection using different light wrap modes and increasing the intensity. You could sort of mimic a really subtle kind of blurry reflection if it was an organic element like that. That's what I would think would be your two ways that you might want to attempt that.
Awesome.
Now, I always like to make mention about the Red Giant website. So, I mean, usually you'll go straight to look at Red Giant Suite Supercomp. Let me just actually head over here to the products, VFX Suite. And if you dive a little bit deeper, you know, I mean, they give you a basic rundown of all of the effects, but specifically the amount of information with VFX Supercomp is pretty impressive. So if you scroll down past all this, it gives you a one-by-one breakdown just within a paragraph of each of the effects and that we've covered today, or the majority of the effects that we've covered.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's like some great information. So, you know, talking about grain, Chad, you talking about the core mat and the heat blur, diffusion, but then also, you know, a whole other level to this, which we didn't mention, but there was some talk about EXR, and it's also worth talking about color space and color space management. So just to show that in the Supercomp panel here.
Hey, while you're getting that loaded up, Nick, really quickly, there's another question, a follow-up question about the OpenEXR stuff. And yes, like the stuff that I was showing, like all had mats, and a few of the things that I was using as components here and there were just regular OpenEXRs that were not pre-composed. So it will respect the extractor and set mat and like all that kind of stuff. The only thing that I found that you need to pre-compose when you bring into Supercomp is 3D stuff. Other than that, like I haven't noticed anything that like needs to be pre-composed. And Simon, you might be able to speak to that more than I do, but like I haven't noticed that like you need to pre-compose a lot of stuff for Supercomp.
Yeah, absolutely right, Chad. The 2.5D even in After Effects as well, that works best when it's being pre-composed. And I loved your comment earlier on when you said that we're looking at developing further things as Supercomp gets older after being a baby. So yes, this has been a feature request about how this is integrated in the future a bit more. So all those comments are being taken on board and we're looking at it as well.
Yes. And then I don't know if anyone saw here, just with when I selected Supercomp, the overall panel with all the layers, onto the output gamma is where you have your color managed controls. And there are quite a few options to choose from, which is pretty sweet. And that was added in 1.5, right, Simon?
Yes, that's right. That's another example of working on things and adding to them as we're going along. So you set that up nicely, Nick.
Yes. So,
by
yes,
the way, Nick, whilst I got the floor, I loved your analogy about when you're talking about light wrap, and a phrase that hangs in my head whenever I think about this thing is Kevin Shaw from the International Colorist Academy a long time ago was talking to me about color grading and explaining that it's like focusing a camera, and you know when you've gone too far and then you can just pull it back again. So for me, whenever I'm doing things like light wrap, that's exactly how I approach it. And you're right, it's an invisible effect, but then when you've gone too far, you can see it. It's easy to dial back in. So it's something to experiment with. And I think that we've all gone too far with focus or color grading. So I think that's the same kind of approach I like to take with light wrap.
Brilliant.
Yes.
That's a great analogy.
That is a great analogy. And Chad, I have some bad news. This is the last week, man.
I know. It's like we have 2 minutes left of this whole thing that we've been doing, buddy.
Yeah,
this is like so great.
Oh yeah, it's like 5 weeks and counting. So first of all, I've seen so many names of people who have attended every week, and I just wanted to thank you guys all for being
Thank
here.
you so much.
It's awesome. It means a lot to me, Chad and Simon, for you guys to be here and just be watching us talk about Supercomp and the VFX Suite. And keep in mind that this is all going to be available for you on the Maxon Volume Program Training, the YouTube channel. Subscribe, and you'll be able to see this video probably within a few hours after we finish this webinar. So again, thank you so much. I also want to make mention to a resource which I'll send out in the email. Simon, you might remember a few months ago, we did a presentation or a talk on demystifying particles, and there was one focus on fire. And with what Chad brought up about fire today, it's good to kind of maybe compare some of that conversation specifically as it has to do with particles and fire, and then Supercomp. That just came to mind. And that, I believe, is on the volume program training. Am I correct, or did that not hit the, here we go, creating fire, sparks, dust, and smoke. I've just answered my own question, but there is some conversation about fire there.
Yeah,
there we go,
absolutely.
Answering my own question. Okay, and then, yes, so then next month, it's all about Cinema 4D. Don't forget, September starting next week. Wow, it's September 2020.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I have to say, both of you, thank you so much for sharing generously all your knowledge for the last 5 weeks. It's been super useful for people. I've just been watching the comments and how appreciative they are. But it's also wonderful to hear how you both personally approach projects, as well as technically what the settings are, because no one does production in a vacuum. And so hearing what people do and what has worked for other people, obviously always as workarounds as well, and how to do things if you're in a pinch for time and so on. So that's been invaluable. So I just want to officially thank you so much for your generosity and for sharing all your knowledge. And in the terms of the questions, that yes, we'll have you back. So we love this format, so we're planning to do more. And so please stay tuned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.
Take care. Thanks so much.